War Sovereign Soaring the Heavens, Chapter 797. Duan Lingtian could understand the feelings of the Darkhan dynasty's emperor. The emperor's most outstanding son and the nephew that was even more outstanding than his son had died just like that, and they died far from home. This was indeed something that was difficult to accept. In next to no time, Duan Lingtian noticed that after the Darkhan dynasty's emperor took a deep breath, his expression recovered to normal, and his face actually revealed a smile when he looked towards Duan Lingtian. Duan Lingtian, congratulations. At the same time, the emperor's voice transmission that was filled with an intention of congratulating entered into Duan Lingtian's ears in a timely manner, and it caused Duan Lingtian to feel his entire body become slightly cold. It was said that emperors are heartless, and today, he could be considered to have completely understood it. Perhaps in his eyes, if his son died, he could give birth to another, whereas, his nephew didn't matter even more. To him, the most important thing was the benefit the Darkhan dynasty could obtain during the martial competition of the 10 dynasties this time. Duan Lingtian thought to himself. Amongst the 50 people that had survived the first round of the selection, the Darkhan dynasty occupied 6 of these positions, causing it to be firmly ranked at the front amongst the 10 dynasties. Whoosh! Whoosh! In next to no time, Duan Lingtian and Zhang Xiaoyang returned to the area where Feng Wu Dao, Sword 13, and Saber 5 stood, whereas, Feng Tianwu, Suli, and Long Yun were already standing in the air there since long ago. Big Brother Duan, Big Brother Zhang. When Feng Tianwu had just come out from the illusory purgatory and returned to Feng Wu Dao's side, her gaze had searched urgently for a trace of Duan Lingtian, and she only heaved a sigh of relief after she saw Duan Lingtian was completely unharmed. Duan Lingtian and Zhang Xiaoyang nodded, and then Zhang Xiaoyang ridiculed. Young Miss Tianwu, you didn't see it in the illusory purgatory earlier. Brother Lingtian was looking for you extremely anxiously. Big Brother Zhang. Duan Lingtian didn't expect that Zhang Xiaoyang would sell him out in the blink of an eye, and he instantly glared angrily at Zhang Xiaoyang. Feng Tianwu's beautiful face flushed bright red when she heard this, and it seemed as if blood would drip out from her face. I and young Miss Tianwu encountered each other early on, and we didn't encounter any formidable enemies. So after we killed a few people, we concealed ourselves at the side and waited for the first round to end. Suli said with a smile, I saw both of you coming out together. Could it be that you encountered each other in there? Yes. Zhang Xiaoyang nodded, and then he heaved a sigh of relief with a slight lingering fear in his heart. Both of you were lucky. I and Brother Lingtian were almost killed by Zai Shang and Lu Yang. The expressions of Feng Tianwu and Suli couldn't help but darken when they heard Zhang Xiaoyang, and Suli said with a frown, how did Zai Shang come to collude with Lu Yang? Even if they joined forces, they might not be a match for Big Brother Duan, right? Feng Tianwu had a certain level of understanding towards Duan Lingtian's strength. Brother Lingtian seemed to be unable to execute that secret technique that's capable of confusing his enemies in there. Zai Shang could be disregarded, as Brother Lingtian had a method to counter Zai Shang's secret technique, and even if he didn't utilize the secret technique, Brother Lingtian wasn't afraid of him. But once Lu Yang exerted his full strength combined with the strength amplified from his grade 3 spirit weapon, it was comparable to the strength of 105 ancient horned dragons. I and Brother Lingtian wouldn't be a match for him if we went head-on against him. Zhang Xiaoyang spoke with slight fear. Then what happened in the end? Feng Tianwu's expression went slightly pale when she heard this. Even though she knew Duan Lingtian had already tided over the difficult situation, yet she still broke out in cold sweat for Duan Lingtian in her heart. As for Duan Lingtian, who was the concerned party, he instead stood at the side with a calm expression. He knew clearly in his heart that even if he and Zhang Xiaoyang weren't sent out of the illusory purgatory in time, they would still be fine. The talisman in his possession was sufficient to easily annihilate Lu Yong. At this moment, no matter if it was Su Li or Long Yun, or even Feng Wu Dao, Sword 13, and Saber 5, all of them couldn't help but look at Zhang Xiaoyang. Obviously, they were all curious about what happened next that allowed Duan Lingtian and Zhang Xiaoyang to tide over that dangerous situation. In the end, Zhang Xiaoyang suddenly started laughing, and he laughed brilliantly. In the end, when Lu Yong made a move against brother Lingtian, the scene before our eyes went black, and then we were sent out of the illusory purgatory. Everyone was dumbstruck when they heard this. Even that can happen? This luck of yours. Su Li felt speechless towards Duan Lingtian and Zhang Xiaoyang's luck. Duan Lingtian. Suddenly, a sonorous voice broke the clamorous atmosphere at the scene, and it caused the scene to become quiet, whereas, the owner of the voice became the center of an attention. The Skywolf Fort's Vice Fort Master, Ning Kan. The gazes of everyone descended onto Ning Kan, and some of the people even faintly guessed what Ning Kan wanted to do. Looks like Vice Fort Master Ning really wants to take Duan Lingtian as his personal disciple. Duan Lingtian is really lucky. Once he becomes the personal disciple of Vice Fort Master Ning, he'll be completely capable of walking unhindered in Skywolf Fort, the ancient desert city, and even the area around the ancient desert city. Many young geniuses from the 10 dynasties that had survived the first round of selections looked at Duan Lingtian with envious gazes. Humph. The corners of Sword 13's mouth curled into a wisp of a cold smile, and he seemed to be ridiculing Ning Kan for not knowing his limitations. Since the beginning, he'd repeatedly declared that Ning Kan didn't have the qualifications to take Duan Lingtian as his personal disciple, and Sword 13's words had even indicated that it was impossible for Duan Lingtian to take Ning Kan as his master. Vice Fort Master Ning, do you have any comments? Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at Ning Kan and spoke frankly. Before the first round of the selections began, I promised that once you passed through the first round of the selections and no matter what method you utilized to pass through it, you can become the personal disciple of Ning Kan. Ning Kan spoke slowly. And then? Duan Lingtian yawned and asked with a slight lack of interest. Ning Kan frowned when he saw Duan Lingtian's attitude, yet he still said with a low voice, now. Ning Kan, the Vice Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, intend to take you, Duan Lingtian, as my personal disciple. From today onwards, the Skywolf Fort will foster you into greatness with its full strength, whereas you must give everything to the Skywolf Fort, including your life. When he finished speaking, Ning Kan said indifferently, all right, you can kneel down and carry out the formalities of taking me as your master. From the beginning until the end, Ning Kan was putting on a one-man show, and he didn't even ask Duan Lingtian's opinion. Moreover, as he finished speaking, he even asked Duan Lingtian to kneel down and carry out the formalities of taking him as master. It was as if he utterly didn't think that Duan Lingtian would refuse him, whereas most of the people present didn't think that Duan Lingtian would refuse. As far as they were concerned, taking Ning Kan as master was only beneficial and not harmful in the slightest. So, Duan Lingtian didn't have any reason to refuse. Vice Fort Master Ning. Right when the gazes of everyone descended onto Duan Lingtian glanced indifferently at Ning Kan. You seem to have not understood something, right? Ning Kan frowned as his expression sank slightly. Could it be that Duan Lingtian is really going to refuse me? For the beginning until the end, Your wish of asking me to take you as my master seemed to only be your own wishful thinking, right? You first asked me to take you as my master, and under the circumstances of not even asking for my opinion, you brazenly asked me to kneel down and conduct the formalities of taking you as my master. Yet I wonder, where did you get such great confidence from? Are you sure I wouldn't refuse? When Duan Lingtian spoke up to hear, he glanced deeply at Ning Kan, and his eyes contained a slight mocking expression. Not to mention Ning Kan's tone of superiority from the beginning caused him to be extremely annoyed. Even if Ning Kan begged him to take Ning Kan as his master, he wouldn't be willing. It was just as Sword 13 had said, a vice-fort master of a mere third-rate sect of the foreign lands truly didn't possess the qualifications to be his master. He, Duan Lingtian, possessed the memories of the 2 lifetimes experienced by the rebirth martial emperor when he came to the foreign lands. As far as he was concerned, only those experts that stood at the peak of the Cloud Continent, martial emperor stage experts, had the qualifications to be his master. A mere old fellow that hadn't even stepped into the martial monarch stage dared talk nonsense before him and wanted to take him as a disciple? Truly laughable. Duan Lingtian's truthful words caused most people present to break out in cold sweat for him. Has Duan Lingtian gone mad? He actually dares to brazenly refuse Vice-Fort Master Ning, and he didn't hold back with his words in the slightest, nor did he leave any room for discussion. Don't forget that he has the experts of the Blade sect by his side to support him. Many people whispered in discussion. Duan Lingtian is simply looking for death. Zai Shang revealed a cold smile. Never had he imagined that Duan Lingtian would actually openly go against the Vice-Fort Master of Skywolf Fort, Ning Kan. After all, this was the territory of the Skywolf Fort. Perhaps the Blade sect wasn't inferior to the Skywolf Fort, yet as the saying goes, a mighty dragon is no match for a serpent in its home. Sword 13 might not be able to protect Duan Lingtian in Skywolf Fort. What exactly does Duan Lingtian want to do? The Darkhan dynasty's emperor was slightly going crazy. He'd led the young geniuses of the Darkhan dynasty to participate in the martial competition of the 10 dynasties precisely for the sake of the Skywolf Fort's rewards. He seemed to have already seen innumerable Grade 3 spirit weapons, Grade 3 medicinal pills, and even concept fragments arriving in his possession when the Skywolf Fort's Vice-Fort Master Ning spoke out with the intention of taking Duan Lingtian as his personal disciple. But at the critical moment, Duan Lingtian's words were like a bucket of cold water that was poured over his head, and it caused him to sober up completely. At the same time that he sobered up, traces of coldness arose in the heart of the Darkhan dynasty's emperor. Could it be that Duan Lingtian doesn't know he's representing our Darkhan dynasty now? If he infuriates Vice-Fort Master Ning, then our Darkhan dynasty will have a hard time as well. Swish. 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 Numerous gazes descended in unison onto Ning Kan, whose expression flickered between a livid and ashen expression and was angered to the point he was infuriated to the extreme. On the other hand, Feng Wei, who stood by Ning Kan's side, abruptly took a step forward, and his icy cold and bone-piercing gaze descended onto Duan Lingtian as he said in a low voice, "Duan Lingtian, my martial uncle wants to take you as personal disciple because he thinks highly of you. Don't be ungrateful. Vice-Fort Master Feng, according to what you said. If I want to take you as a personal disciple, it's also because I think highly of you." Duan Lingtian wasn't afraid of Feng Wei in the slightest as he calmly met Feng Wei's gaze and spoke word by word. "Who do you think you are to dare compare yourself with my martial uncle? You." Feng Wei's eyes were filled with extreme rage as he spoke coldly. But he hadn't finished speaking when he was stopped by the nearby Ning Kan with a raise of his hand. Nang Kan's gaze that didn't contain any emotion descended calmly onto Duan Ling Tian. Alright? Then I'll ask you. Are you willing to take me as your master? I hope you enjoy the video. Don't forget like, share, subscribe to channels.